Hello, hello. This is the Well of Being podcast, and it's M.E.C. You haven't seen me in a bit, potentially. And that's because I've been navigating some bad weeks. And so I really wanted to kind of jump into how I've been doing that and trying to give myself grace as I navigate some not so fun times. As a small update that I will keep short, I have not been here because I just feel like stress has been high and I always want to be in a space intentionally. And so I was like, I want to make sure that my content reflects that I am being aware of my own mental health as well. So I took a small break. As many of you know, I'm in medical school, and school has been difficult in many ways. And one of them is that I've really been graced enough with the ability that I can see patients and, make an impact, hopefully, in their life somewhat in a positive way. And one of my patients was not doing very well, and I had formed a bond with this person, and I was really taking it personally that they weren't doing well, which is always like a no-no, but I really bonded with this person, and their health is not well, and that was really taking an emotional toll on me because I was seeing their decline, and seeing that was really disturbing to me, and also just, from being able to talk to them and to them not being able to recognize me to that progression, I was experiencing a lot of grief over it, even though, I have a limited interactions with this person. I'm, the medical student who's helping take care of them, and then I would go and visit them, but that was really hard, and yeah, that was hard. In addition, I think just, other life problems like social things, and, I cried in the bathroom twice today, and I just felt like, you know what, let's talk about bad weeks, because they're not great. In particular, I think that when you are someone who's been on this quote-unquote mental health journey or whatever, there's this very strong desire to associate how well your weeks are going or how well your life is going with your mental health. And so if you've been facing a bunch of difficulties, you're like, oh my goodness, my mental health is going back to crap, and that I have to see myself decline, and I'm going to get depressed and anxious again, and that's going to really stink. Because we're catastrophizing, one, and then two, fortune telling. And I was definitely doing that. I was like, oh, I'm feeling it again. Oh no, I'm going to be not sleeping well. I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to be sad because my week is not going well. And I can just tell that it's going to reflect in my mental health. And despite the fact that these weeks have been really hard, I actually don't think I'm moving backwards with my mental health. And that's something that I really want to emphasize, because when we face difficulty and we have an appropriate response to that difficulty, if I'm experiencing grief because my patient's not doing well and I care about them, then I'm allowed to express sadness at that situation. If you're having a family problem and it is really stressful and you end up crying because of it or expressing frustration or anger because of it in a way that doesn't hurt other people, that's an appropriate response. It doesn't necessarily mean you're moving backwards with your mental health or you're going back to a dark place. Those are appropriate responses to difficult things in your life. Or at least, so I tell myself in the mirror several times a day. So what I'm saying is, often if you are mental health oriented, I feel like there's a compulsion to just constantly monitor how you're doing, and if you see some sort of emotional response, you're like, oh, I'm going back into this like negative space, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. I think it is also equally important to realize when I might be falling back into some, not so great mental health habits if you're, feeling really anxious, or if you actually are manifesting a depressive episode. That's something important to notice. But what I'm saying is, if you're dealing with difficult stuff, it does not automatically mean I'm going to be depressed, or it doesn't automatically mean I'm going to go back to being really anxious. And I think knowing that you can do difficult things, and also having appropriate emotional responses to those doesn't necessarily reflect on your healing journey is very reassuring. Because I hate like the feeling of going backwards or being like, oh, this is happening again. This cycle is happening again where I feel like I'm doing fine, and then all of a sudden I just kind of fall off with my schedule, and then I start feeling bad, and then I'm anxious, and then I don't sleep, and then I'm like in this really dark place, and then I get back out of it, and then I'm back. That like whole cycle is exhausting. And if you've managed to get out of it, or you're at the, place where you're feeling good, there is this constant fear, you look behind you in your rearview mirror and you're like, oh my God, it's coming back. It's coming back and I don't want it here. And also I feel like that preoccupation with, oh, it could be coming back. It could come back at any time. That negative, difficult time that I had could be coming back at any time, makes you preoccupied with feeling bad. You're like, oh man, I could feel bad at any time. But I'm feeling good right now, but I could feel bad at any time. It could always happen. I don't think that's the goal either. It's important to be aware of your emotional state, which is something I'm going to talk about too, because I don't think we're very good at it, and I've talked about that in the past. But I also don't think it's healthy for us to be obsessed with constantly checking to see if we're depressed or anxious or not. Because I feel like the more you check, the more you're just like reinforcing that you feel like you should be. And that's not the goal. So yeah, I'm not moving backwards with my mental health, but I am navigating some difficult crap, and I feel like I'm doing okay. And that means that I also feel like if you're listening to this and you resonate with that experience, you are not going backwards in your mental health. Healing is not linear. I'll say it like a billion times and it can sound really Oprah-y and like pretentious, but it's not. Healing is so far from linear. When I think about where I was in 2020 when I first went to therapy, I am so much stronger of a person that and that sounds so eat, pray, love of me. I'm noticing right now that I keep wanting to censor myself because I feel like I'm being cliche or obnoxious, but often many of us do not allow ourselves to kind of reflect on our growth, and when we do, we automatically think, oh, that's so cringy and like not humble of me, because someone has told you, society probably, I don't know, that it's not appropriate for you to reflect on your wins. And so I'm going to challenge that and talk about my progress right now. But yes, in 2020, I was extremely anxious. I've never been that anxious in my entire freaking life. I had symptoms of OCD. I was not functioning. I was not sleeping. I could not do anything besides my compulsions to like check on things. And so compared to that, where I am right now, it seems like a miracle, but I did the work. And so in a similar way, if you are feeling along the lines of this, rat race circular, I feel like I was doing fine and then now I'm not doing fine and I feel like it's just so wishy-washy and I don't know how to, I promise you are in a better spot right now and you are doing things that your previous self could have only dreamed of. You are. Even if you feel like, when I'm not proud of the stuff I'm doing right now, the fact that you're able to have that self-reflection is really an amazing step that many people do not get to. So, I don't know, kudos to you for having self-reflection, even if you're not happy with where you're at right now. That's just how I feel. All that is to say that if you're having a difficult week, it doesn't mean you're going back to difficult mental health times. If you're experiencing difficult mental health times, you are better than you were before, and you are reflecting right now. And the fact that you're able to have that sort of introspection is progress. It is. I'm telling you, you're making progress. Nice. So, like, how I've been navigating these, honestly, very exhausting, events that have been kind of in my life and preventing me from doing things that I find to be fulfilling, aka like making this podcast and making content. I've been really trying to carve out time to have fun. I think many of us in this community, from what I've read, we are very interested in pushing ourselves beyond our means sometimes and being like, I need to deserve fun. I didn't get enough work done today, so I don't deserve to have a good time. That concept is garbage. It's hot garbage, and it's been sitting in the sun, and it needs to go somewhere else. So I've been really telling myself, you know what, yes, I'm allowed to have fun, even if I, didn't do well on this test, or even if I have, not been as productive as I wanted to be. And so even if I didn't, quote unquote, deserve it by my brain standards, I played Animal Crossing, which is like a really fun Switch game that's very cozy and I enjoy it. And I watched a Pokemon movie with my friends this week, and that sounds really small, but these are big wins for me, people. These are big wins. And so I urge you to really take time to schedule in some fun, or if someone offers you a spontaneous time to have fun, even if you feel like you don't deserve it, I would just urge you to go, especially if you're having a bad week. I feel like that's really, really helpful. It just helps you get out of your head and get off of focusing about what's going wrong, because that's something that's also extremely difficult. Also, there's a dynamic within my head when I'm experiencing a difficult time that goes very quickly back and forth between I am focusing and thinking and reliving all the not so great things that happened to me this week, and I'm thinking about what they looked like, and I'm preoccupied with them, and I'm not, in the moment per se, because I'm imagining in vivid detail and reliving these events that sucked, right? But there's also, while I'm doing that, I am preoccupied with what happened and going through what happened, but I'm not allowing myself to emotionally process what happened. And that's really interesting to me. I think a lot of people do it. And what do I mean by that? Let's just say you are at work or in class, you're giving a presentation, you said something, and someone asked you a really hard question, and you looked at them and thought, oh my God, I don't know the answer to this question. And you felt really dumb, and you weren't able to smoothly recover, and so then you're just reliving that scenario in your head. We often will just replay it, but not really emotionally process it, being like, at that time, I was embarrassed, I was unprepared, and I panicked and felt very overwhelmed. How do I feel right now? Do I still feel some of that panic? Probably not, because you're not in that situation anymore. But what you probably feel is residual embarrassment and maybe some fear over how people will view you moving forward. And so I think taking the time to really dissect what was I feeling at that time. Is there anything that's residually left over from that event, that negative event that happened, that I'm feeling currently? Or is it different? Am I feeling different negative emotions or feelings as a result of what had happened? Because when I think about acknowledging fear or acknowledging embarrassment, I cringe. I don't want to do it. I'm like, oh, let's shove that back down there, and I'll just keep replaying the moment in my head and overanalyzing what happened. But I'm not allowing myself to feel that embarrassment or feel that fear, because the minute it comes back up, I'm shoving it back down, and I'm just going to keep replaying what happened and not processing. That is part of the reason why I did in fact cry in a cafe bathroom this morning, was because yesterday I went to go see that patient, and I had acknowledged that they were not doing well, and I really didn't allow myself to emotionally process what I had seen or what I was feeling. Yeah, I just didn't allow myself to process what I was feeling after seeing the patient. And so I just kind of shoved it down, was like, I'll deal with that later, and I didn't. And so in the cafe this morning, I wasn't feeling like myself, and something else had gone wrong, and I was like, I've I feel like my emotional responses are a little bit exaggerated right now, and I realize it's because I wasn't taking the time to process what had gone wrong yesterday. So I moseyed on over to the bathroom and I locked the door, and I was like, how am I feeling right now? And what came up was grief. I was grieving for my patient. I was also frustrated that I couldn't do anything about it. And I was also feeling hurt over other social stuff that had been going on. And I just really broke down in the bathroom crying. And my first inclination was to stop crying. I was like, stop, hold it in. You know, like when you're trying desperately not to cry and you like start taking really big breaths of air to like suppress. And I was like, why am I doing that? I need to actually get this out. And so I just did. And it felt weird. It felt weird allowing myself to express emotional distress in that way with myself and not trying to hold it back. Because I think most of the time when people cry, the goal is not to continue crying or to get it out. The goal is to stop crying, to withhold that emotion. It doesn't just go for crying, but that's just the one that I think is probably the most relatable. And it was such a strange experience because I don't allow myself to just express raw emotion because I'm very preoccupied with curating my emotions to the situation, and is this appropriate, and what will other people think if they see me? Will I make other people uncomfortable if I express this? That kind of thing. And so because I was by myself and because no one is opening this door because it is locked, it is a locked bathroom door, I can do whatever I want. It's a loud cafe, no one can hear me. That's where I chose to do it. I mean, I'm not saying I recommend crying in all cafe bathrooms, that's up to you, but I'm just saying it worked in this particular case. And it illustrates my point that you should allow yourself to feel without holding back, even if you don't want to. And we don't want to because it's vulnerable, right? We're probably suppressing emotions that we don't like very much, or truths that we don't like very much. And so we're like, yeah, I'd actually rather not feel that. But does that mean that it goes away? No, it remains unprocessed. And then that's kind of when personally it like stacks up, and then I'm like, why am I feeling this way? I'm having really strong emotional responses to stuff that's actually not that bad. And I'm like, oh, it's because it's been building up and I just haven't been taking the time to really take care of myself again, as I do. But yeah, that's something that I really took the time to do intentionally, and I'm going to try to do it more frequently because while it was kind of weird feeling, I think it was also very helpful. Another thing that I want to emphasize is I really want you to challenge your desire to isolate yourself. When I'm not feeling good, I like to hide myself. And for many reasons. One, I don't like being vulnerable in front of people, which sounds ironic because I'm sharing my innermost thoughts with you and, about a billion other people on the internet. However, I think that when it comes to people who you know really personally, it's very easy to not want to burden them with your person, and when I say your person, I mean your entirety of a person. We often only show a very small part of our person with other people because it is not convenient for them. We're aware it's not convenient for them. Most of the people who are listening to this podcast are very emotionally aware. You are probably very emotionally aware. And so as a result, you're like, I actually don't want to burden someone with this. I know that this is a difficult thing to deal with, so I don't want to give this to someone else. So I'll just keep it to myself. I also don't want people to view me negatively or like think that I'm always sad or that I'm always anxious. So I'll just keep that part of myself behind closed doors and isolate myself. And that makes it so much harder to find joy or to find gratitude or to not feel sorry for ourselves because we are just stuck in this self-centered loop of pity and sadness that honestly someone just coming up to you and talking and having a completely non-related conversation can help you get out of. And so I would urge you, even if you don't want to, try not to isolate yourself, please. Please. I've been really challenging myself to do this, to like go to group events, even if I'm not feeling 100%, because I do think it is extremely helpful. I do. It is, you don't deserve to be alone. Granted, there are times when you need time away from other people. Have your solitary time. Play games in your room. Read your favorite book. Listen to your favorite podcast. Do whatever you need to do to kind of decongest from everyone else's energy before you go out and do that. But you should not be isolating yourself for like several days if you're not feeling good just because you don't want other people to see you that way. That's not healthy. And I care about your health, so. And the last thing that I've been doing is reflecting even when I don't want to. I kind of alluded to this earlier with kind of identifying your feelings and letting you feel them, but there's also a really important part of it, which is kind of going through your thoughts systematically with either a therapist, or if you're journaling, or some people like to talk into a microphone and post it on the internet. Like, I couldn't possibly think who that would be. However you like to process your emotions, I think that that's really important. It sucks. Like, I'm not gonna lie. It does not feel good to be like, yeah, well, that was a really toxic thinking process that I was doing yesterday. And I actually engage in that several times a week and have made it a really nasty habit of mine. Like, no one wants to go through something and say that about themselves, but it is very important because then you can identify it and then, make steps you need to do to change it. So I have not seen my lovely therapist in, 4 weeks? Listen, my med school schedule sucks, and so I was like, this is not as important right now. I'm feeling good, so I just won't see her, and that was silly of me. It was. So I scheduled an appointment, so I'll be seeing her this week, and I think that that is probably the best way for me to go through my thoughts. I'll probably force myself to journal tonight as well. And I say force myself because, listen, journaling is not always this beautiful, cathartic, romanticized experience. Sometimes, okay, if I'm being honest with you, I take like a Muji pen, love the way those things write. I'll be writing in my anti-anxiety notebook, which I can link if y'all want. And I'm looking at my handwriting and it looks like chicken scratch. And I'm, writing out things that I don't want to read about myself. And I'm like, why did I do that? And it doesn't feel particularly poetic at the time. I'm going to tell you that right now. However, when I am done writing, whether there's teardrops on the page or not, I close the book or the journal or whatever, and I do in fact feel lighter. And that's what I think is important. I don't think I'm going to go and read what I wrote, and I'm not going to hone in on the fact that my handwriting looks bad. I'm just going to tough through the experience of learning to reflect on what's going on in my life and focusing on that release feeling afterwards. I draw a very strong parallel to that in exercise. I'm not a person who's like, oh my goodness, I'm just so excited to exercise and things like that. In fact, I haven't exercised in a minute. However, I do know that after I'm done exercising, I typically feel pretty good. I'm like, wow, these gains, listen, after one session of Zumba, yeah, like I'm vibing. There are no gains. There are none. Fun fact, I do teach exercise dance class. It's K-pop themed. The more you know. But yeah, so I think I draw a parallel very much to that. I think that it's a skill that is not the most fun to practice, but you are glad you practiced it. And that's just kind of how I'm navigating these difficult weeks. I think that the stuff that I've been going through is unfortunately normal. I know tons of people go through this all the time, but it's different when it's happening to you, and I don't think that I should make myself feel bad because I'm struggling through things that I'm struggling with. I think there's a very strong desire to be like, other people deal with this all the time, or other people have it way harder than me, so I shouldn't even be struggling, or I shouldn't be complaining. That is a key to misery, my friend. I don't like comparing myself to other people. And it's funny because I've been really working for several years now on growth mindset, which I think I talked about in one of my previous podcast episodes, but a brief recap, it is basically whenever you experience failure, you don't take it as failure. You're like, you know what? I can learn from this. What can I learn from this? You figure out what you can learn from that, and you take it and keep going. It's very similar to persevering, but you are reflecting as a part of it and allowing yourself to take that failure into your growth process. Sounds very fancy. It's not as cute in real life when you fail. It's not. But I'm really feeling it start to work because I didn't do really well on something in school the other day. And you know what? I didn't even get that upset about it. I thought, yeah, I could have done this and this better, and I'm learning from this, and I'm going to do better next time. And I didn't even let it affect me as strongly as I thought it would. And going back full circle to the beginning of this episode, when I think about where I was at in 2020, which is now 3 years ago, my goodness, I could not have done that. I could not have done that. And I was still a big proponent of growth mindset back then, but just knowing how much better I've gotten at that mindset, it has done me wonders. And so I just really encourage you to, even if it doesn't feel like you're making progress on a small day-to-day basis, you probably are making a lot of progress in the grand scheme of things. And it's really helped because I think if I was given this same exact week, all the things that this week encompassed 3 years ago, I would not have been able to handle it. And so, I don't know, give yourself a pat on the back for the stuff that you're struggling through right now, because your previous self might not have been able to handle it, and you're doing it right now. So I'm going to step down from my hyping you up train, and I want to say thank you to people who've checked in and been like, where have you been? I'm here, I promise, and I actually do appreciate you checking in. That's really nice of y'all. In addition, I also really thank people for leaving some really lovely reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever you were listening to this right now. I do read every one of them, and they do make me feel very happy. Thank you, because that just makes me feel validated, and it's just this big validating train that feels very wholesome and lovely, and it's a part of the internet that I don't get to experience very often. It's a space that feels really safe and community oriented, and people are supporting each other. I'm going on a tangent. This is all to say thank you if you've left a review or if you've left a rating. I really do appreciate that, and I really am working on creating a place where we can actually have an interactive community, so stay tuned for that, because there's almost 1,500 of you following along, and there's 15,000 listens on this, and that's really amazing. It just means that there's so many people who are going through the same things that you are going through and that I'm going through, and I think it would be really amazing for us all to have a little space of the internet that's wholesome that we can call our own. So I hope that your week goes better than mine did, and if it doesn't, and somehow it is worse or on the same level, that this was somewhat supporting for you and that you have some tools that you can take with you to feel like this week is manageable. Wishing you the very best, as always. I will see you next week. Bye.